It is now my pleasure to introduce Priyanka. Oh, I said that badly. Sharma, a consultant, a coach, a facilitator working to spread compassion and empathy in the world. Today, speaking on what is happening to the silent listeners in the empathy circle and the benefits of silent listening.
Yeah,
Priyanka,
thank you, Priyanka.
welcome.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate this summit, and I'm so excited to see all of us here together to learn more about empathy. Today, I'm going to talk about the silent listening in the empathy circle and some reflections I have on it from my own practice, and also I looked up some research on what role silence plays in communication. So I'll start my talk by explaining a little bit about the communication model by Jacobson and some research on what researchers have found about the role of silence. And using that, I will just reflect on my experiences in the empathy circle, what I've heard from other people, and also my own experience about being a silent listener in the empathy circle and how that facilitates and fosters connection and understanding. I want to start by reading a poem by Emily Dickinson, and it goes something like this. Silence is all we dread. There's ransom in a voice, but silence is infinity himself, have not a face. So the poem roughly means silence is something we all dread. And this is also there in a lot of research, especially in Mediterranean cultures like Spain and Italy. Silence is not welcome in conversations, and it's very noisy culture, as the researchers called it, and so are Arab culture. Whereas other cultures, like in Japan and China, silence is very contextual and it has to be understood in conversations. It could be a deflection of they want to say no, but they can't say it openly to your face. So they use silence as a soft no. And that happens in India also, which is a high context culture. But silence is also used to foster understanding, empathy, and a reflective space. And especially in Nordic cultures, this is the case where listening is encouraged more than speaking often. And researchers found that silence in conversations really fosters a reflective space and more engagement with the person that is speaking. And when people have those pauses to introspect and to reflect, whatever information has been shared is taken more. It seems to have more retention, and people engage more with that information. What is silence defined as in communication? It's basically the absence of noise, and also in non-verbal communication, sometimes when we are talking to one another, we use noises like, oh, yeah, ah, and that's also a way of communicating. The problem with all of these noises is that it can interfere in the person's process because even though we are not using words, we are interjecting ourselves into that conversation. So when someone says something and I do, oh, I'm interjecting my reaction, even though it's not verbal. I'm not saying I'm surprised, but I'm still interjecting my experience into it. And that can distract people. So I was recently in a meeting where there was this person who every time the speaker was saying something would go, oh, really? Ah, and it was so distracting for me as a listener. I couldn't listen deeply to the person that was sharing because this person was constantly interjecting their reactions into. So in a silent, in an empathy circle, silent listening, actually, my experience was it was quite scary in the beginning to just be silent because words and small talk, I realized that I was using it as an armor to not be vulnerable. So I remember there was one workshop where we just had to first be silent and not say anything and just look at each other. it was the scariest experience because suddenly I was there in this silence and I had to be vulnerable and I couldn't use the armor of words or small talk to kind of like replace my anxiety. And when I reflected on it, the anxiety was about being accepted by the other person, about belonging, and not having that verbal validation from the person that you're okay for me, you belong, you're safe here. And but we can communicate that with silence as well. This the non-verbal cues here become very important. Silence can be used to communicate distaste or hatred, but it can also be used to communicate empathy and understanding, which is what we do in the empathy circle. So when I'm in the empathy circle, when other people are silently listening, I'm taking in what they are communicating to my message through their non-verbal body language. So through their facial expressions, even though there's no sound that is distracting me, the verbal expressions are still there. And I can discern when I'm being received warmly welcomed by the other person through their listening and when I'm not. So this cultivating this kind of presence, I think as a silent listener in an empathy circle is very important. That kind of presence where the other person feels welcome, feels safe, and feels received. And at the same time, I'm not interjecting my experience to distract the other person or other people who are listening in the circle. And for example, this can happen when I'm triggered by what the other person is saying. And if I'm not able to hold that trigger and my face shows, this kind of exaggerated shock, it can distract the other person. And suddenly, instead of being in their process, they have to take care of me because I look so distressed. So practicing self-empathy at the same time as listening to the other person there's so much happening when a silent listener is listening. Although it seems like there's not much happening. The silent listener deals with whatever's coming up within by giving oneself self-empathy and at the same time being with the other person in a way that is not distracting for that person. That I'm making sure that I'm accompanying the person, but I'm not interjecting my reaction, my world into them, so that I can walk with them and they can be safe in that process. So this is something that is challenging, I think, for silent listeners. And another thing that is challenging is when someone says something and I really am triggered and I want to say something. I really want to say something and I can't hold it. I really want to say it. So in an empathy circle, it's so beautiful because when we practice being in an empathy circle, it gives us that ability to be silent and not react. So it helps us to work on our reactivity. Like Bob was mentioning about consciousness, being aware, being aware, being aware. Often we don't know when we are in a conversation, our habitual way is to react and to just blurt out words. The empathy circle really taught me in a very embodied way to to learn how to really contain my my reaction, my wish to react rather than respond. And I noticed that when I held it in and I waited for my turn, my response is much better. Now, when I wanted to react to the person, it was a response rather than a reaction. And oftentimes I even forgot about it and I spoke about something completely different because I had processed it. And it just made me wonder in everyday conversations, in normal conversations, how many words I'm using that are superfluous, that are just reactions, and how many times I might have not really reflected. And so, what as an as a silent listener in an empathy circle, I've also heard many people say, ask me questions like, "So I'm just supposed to sit there and not do anything?" It's like you will be doing a lot. And this is the reaction I get after the circle. It was like, Yeah, I really wanted to jump in and I really wanted to say something to this person. I wanted to save this person. I wanted to console. Many people have a problem when somebody is sharing something that's very sad for them. And we want to jump in and save that person. We want, no, 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 you're not ugly. You're really beautiful. No, we want to say something reassuring. And that is not empathy. And to train ourselves to do that, it's really what you learn as an active listener in an empathy circle. And the we think, oh, we are just being silent, but silence we communicate so much through silence, so much. And this is what the research also says. Through silence, you're communicating respect to the other person. You're communicating compassion to the other person. You're communicating a wish to create a safe container, a reflective space for the other person who's speaking. You're communicating to that other person that I value you. I'm listening so deeply to you because I value you, and what you are sharing is important to me. So you are actually not silent. And coming back to the poem that Emily Dickinson shared, and what Bob was also speaking about consciousness. In many Eastern and mystical traditions, silence is the way to the infinite. Silence is the way we connect to the divine. And in an empathy circle, when we are silently listening, silence is a beautiful way to connect to other people who are speaking, to share with them a common humanity, and to give them the sense that you are valued. Thank you so much for listening. I'm open if anyone has any questions, if I still have time.
You still have 2 minutes. We can drop some questions in the chat if anybody has something bubbling up. I, for one, felt so seen when you talked about the faces reacting because my face faces without my permission on the regular basis. And empathy circles have absolutely helped me learn how to control that.
I have a question. What's been your experience with empathy circles, Priyanka? I know you're in India and you've been holding empathy circles there. Can you just say a few words about that?
Yeah, so we started an empathy circle in India Friendly Time Zone. I'm co-facilitating it with Kedar. And my experience in India has been that in India, when someone cries, the first thing people want to do for that person is offer them water to drink or to console them, like do something, you know. So that was something people shared, that they really had to hold back when someone was sharing something sensitive, not to jump up as a community and to share, and also share vulnerable things about what's happening in our country culturally, socially. There's no place where people can be themselves because culturally, people put on so many masks that in their families they can't share. They share a lot of things they can't share with their families, with their even with their loved ones. So it's beautiful to receive all that.
One more quick question from the chat. Jody wonders, what are your thoughts about putting silent reactions in the chat? As a speaker, she enjoys receiving those.
Hmm. Yeah, my thoughts are I would not encourage that because it distracts the speaker and it distracts other participants because silent listening is almost like a meditation. We have to be so present to what is going on within us and what is going on in the other person. In silent listening, we are listening to also what is not said. So it takes up a lot of psychological resources, psychic resources. And if I'm also have to look at the chat and monitor the chat, it can be a distraction.
That is fantastic. Thank you so much, Priyanka. This was amazing. I heard silence, fear, or curiosity in space. Again, I'm 100% was that nonverbal person. Oh, and empathy circles absolutely help me hold space in silence. I love when you said walk with them so they are safe to follow their path. Facts, facts. Empathy circles support awareness of our triggers and practice non reactive responses. I hear empathy circles are practical training for new patterns and habits. I love that. Thank you so much. That was powerful.